The Female Villain by Cheyenne Alcombright. This presentation aims to discuss the common archetypes for the female villain found in cinema. The three common archetypes that I would like to focus on within this presentation include the femme fatale, the scorned woman, and the wicked stepmother. Why is this important? Female villains share qualities that fit specific archetypes in films. These archetypes are carefully sculpted to fit the film's narrative. Most of the time, this is catering to a male audience. There are less representations of women seen as the villain in many films. There's also a narrower variety of character tropes, such as the specific type of villain that you see a woman being portrayed as. Also, many of the times, the characters are sexually exploited, either through their outfits that they're wearing or the behavior that the character is using throughout the film. Also, a female villain is versus just the villain. The definition of evil or villain seems to be defined by the male representations, such as the term president used to only refer to white males. It seems that when a female does it, she gets put into a specific category, but when a male does it, it just is. Starting with the femme fatale, what we typically see is our female antagonist using her sexuality as her superpower. Doing this, she usually distracts, lures, deceives, and even murders the protagonist within the film. These are questions to consider. Why is there no name for when a male carries out these actions, such as we have a name for when a female does it, like femme fatale? Another question to consider is, why is it when a man does it, it just is? And the third question to consider is this creating a stereotype that all women have ulterior motives? Some examples I would like to discuss start with the silent film era and the early cinema. Theda Bara, also known as the Vamp, gave early cinema sexually dominant performances. She was typically typecast in these roles for her exoticism, which she had been known for. The next era I would like to focus on is the film noir era. Barbara Stanwyck plays Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity. She portrays a narcissistic wife whose actions are fueled by greed. Stanwyck's excellent rendition of the classic femme fatale has been praised for her alluring and deceiving motives. Modern day film. In Basic Instinct, Sharon Stone's famous vagina flashing scene shows her character seducing the protagonist while simultaneously distracting him from solving a murder that she committed. All of these examples show a different version of a femme fatale, and yet all of them are using their sexuality in some way to get what they want. Next, I would like to talk about the scorned woman. Hell hath no fury for a woman scorned. What we typically see in films is a common storyline for the scorned woman, which usually includes a revenge plot. This revenge plot usually follows something like the woman was wronged, or she was cheated, or maybe she was even rejected. So questions to consider with this are, why is there such a stigma on females carrying out violent acts in revenge films compared to males doing it? And another question to consider is, does a female wanting revenge make her crazy? Some examples I'd like to pull through start with the wronged archetype. In the movie Carrie, which is a sci-fi horror film, it shows a young girl who's bullied by her peers until she reaches her final breaking point. She ultimately uses her telekinesis to seek revenge against her offenders and murders them all in a fit of rage. Carrie was wronged, and this revenge film has to do with her getting back at all of these people for doing that, like for bullying her and treating her awfully. The next example would be Cheated. So I used Jennifer's Body for an example. In Jennifer's Body, it consists of a feminist revenge plot. Jennifer becomes a literal man-eater after she is sexually abused and murdered by a group of boys. She seeks revenge by preying on the flesh of all of her male peers for being cheated and having her life taken away. The last example I'd like to talk about is the Rejected narrative. Glenn Close plays a delusional mistress whose lust for a married man drives her mad in Fatal Attraction. Her character cannot handle rejection from the married man that she's in love with, and her attraction becomes fatal in the end. This is a case of Glenn Close's character not being able to handle her rejection and taking it to like the ultimate level of murdering somebody. So that's a third example of a woman who is scorned. The next archetype I'd like to talk about is the wicked stepmother and the witch. What we typically see is a manipulative, evil, and unloving character. These wicked women take pride in causing the protagonist hell, or even any character within the film just absolute hell. Usually there's an underlying reason, though, to the monstrous ways that they act. These can include jealousy or having ulterior motives. So some questions to consider would be, why do we see more depictions of wicked stepmothers than wicked stepfathers? Another question to consider would be, does this character cultivate a negative stereotype for all stepmothers? Some examples I'd like to talk about. The first one would be the Wicked Witch. The Wicked Witch in Disney's Snow White is jealous of Snow White's beauty. She's old and decrepit, and she sees Snow White as a threat. So she tricks Snow White into eating a poison apple in order to steal her youth back. So another example I chose was the evil mother, or / grandmother in this case. So Louise Fletcher in Flowers in the Attic was extremely jealous of the relationship between her husband and her daughter, including the fact that she was also extremely religious, and found out that her daughter and her husband had some type of incestual relationship because of her uncle or between them. So the way that the evil mother carries out her punishments are very cruel and inhumane, and because of this jealousy, she takes it out on her daughter, and she takes it out on her grandchildren. Her feelings were ammo for her to mistreat all these people. And our third would be ulterior motives. So I chose an example from the movie The Parent Trap, where Meredith Blake is a money-hungry cougar. She uses her youth and beauty to seduce wealthy men, like the classic gold digger. She reveals her true intentions to the twins and reveals her true colors, which means and says how she's only basically in the relationship because she loves their daddy's money, and she could care less about them and that they're brats, and she's just a very heartless woman. Important conclusions I would like to make. Within the common archetypes that I found, I think that it's important to recognize the pattern in which most female villains are portrayed. A lot of the times they're definitely overly sexualized, like I said, within their outfits. I gave an example with a picture using Harley Quinn, or Catwoman could be another example. Also, like in their behavior as well, just in the way that they carry themselves throughout the film can be very flirtatious or seductive, compared to a man who would have the same sort of status or the same job or may even be her partner. There's a lot less representation for females as being the villain in films. Before getting into this project, I had Googled the word villain, and it took me about 3 or 4 pages to scroll through the Google image search to find a picture of a woman, because they were all just pictures and different characters of male villains. So I think that there's a stigma about, evil and males having dominated this kind of space and this type of character, especially within films. Also, I think there's a negative energy that comes with it, especially for the stepmother. It could create a bad stereotype for most families, where if you see a stepmother come in and causing like a rift between the family. It can kind of create this idea that all stepmothers are bad, or coming from a bad place and being evil to the family are harmful, and like just messing up the homeostasis of how the family's dynamic was working. My last point is that I want to make is that I feel that having these archetypes within films makes it very limiting to some actresses who may want to play female villains or roles. Like, these archetypes cause actresses to be typecast. Like, for example, Kathy Bates usually gets put in the same type of role. For example, all of her roles within American Horror Story usually have like a masculine, evil energy to them, even outside of American Horror Story with like Misery or just like that. I'd like to also mention other female villains that I was not able to include within my examples, but I'm going to start with, we have Aunt Lydia in the corner. We have the Queen of Hearts, the witches from Hocus Pocus, Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada, our Professor Umbridge from Harry Potter, and Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest. Some more great examples could be Cruella de Vil, Catwoman, Regina George from Mean Girls, Nurse Ratched from One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Ursula, Maleficent, and even Mrs. Molt from The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Thank you, and that was my presentation.